Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 5th International Conference on Men and Equal Opportunities. I'm very sorry for the short, or more than a little bit short, delay in the conference schedule so far. We've had some technical difficulties that we've been able to overcome and are more than happy to resume with the program as such. My name is Karel Parve, and it is my pleasure to walk you through the last part of the first day of the conference, which is the workshop on men promoting gender equality. Before we start, then a couple of quick words about me. I am currently working in the financial sector, and I am the head of private banking at a local bank here in Estonia. That is not the reason why I'm standing here before you today. Actually, after I received my bachelor's degree in the US and moved back to Estonia, then my first job was with the Ministry of Social Affairs, who is the organizer of this, or one of the organizers of this event as well. And I was working on the Norway Grants program on mainstreaming gender equality and promoting work-life balance. After I left the public sector, I've also been involved in training mid-level managers on matters of diversity and equality, so I've still remained in touch with the topic, and it is still very close and dear to my heart. But enough about me, and let's get to the part that you've all been waiting for the most, which are our fantastic speakers. As we are a little behind on the schedule, then we'll start with going through all of the speakers one by one. We will try and take questions in the end if we have some time, and I hope that's okay with you, and you will understand that as well. So, without further ado, we've also made some changes to the schedule, so we'll be starting with the third speaker on your schedule, which is Ander Bergara. Having been born in the Basque country of Bilbao, and after receiving his degree in law in 1995, and Ander started working at Emakunde, the Basque Institute for Women, which is the Basque government's gender equality agency. Today, Ander will talk to us about Gizondus initiative, a program that aims to boost the awareness, participation and involvement of men in supporting equality between women and men. He's also a trainer and author of some publications on men and gender equality. So without further ado, I yield the stage or screen to Ander.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Karel, for the introduction. And I'm going to try to share my presentation. Okay. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, you're good to go, Ander.
Yes, okay. So I would like to start by giving thanks to the organizers for the invitation to participate in this conference and giving us the possibility to explain the work we are carrying out in the Basque government to involve men in favor of equality. To begin with, I'm going to give some background information about the Basque Country. The Basque Country is a small European region situated in the south of Europe with 2,200,000 inhabitants and a high level of autonomy and development. The Basque Institute for Women, Emakunde, is the gender equality agency of the Basque government, which was created in 1988. And Emakunde, in 2007, launched a specific initiative focused on men, in particular to promote the men involvement in supporting gender equality. Gizonduz, the Basque term gizonduz, is referred to the process of becoming a man and strives to transmit the idea that equality makes men become more manly, in the sense of more human, complete, and better individuals. The objectives of the program are the following: to increase the number of men who are sensitive and committed to equality and against violence against women, to increase the number of men who receive training in the field of equality between women and men, and to increase the level of co-responsibility or responsibility that men have in domestic and care work. According to available data, men do only 33% of the care work in the Basque Country. Precisely, the main purpose of the program is to put care at the center of men's lives, because we know that is the key, it's a key factor to advance women's rights and gender equality. The program is based on a feminist and diversity-sensitive approach, and it's been conceived to complement women's empowerment. The program is focused on questioning masculine power and privileges as a way to promote men's personal growth and a more just, equal, and peaceful society. Now I'm going to tell you about the activities we have been carried out since the program was created in 2007. With regard to campaigns, publicity campaigns, in 2007, we launched the first campaign with the slogan, "Equality makes you more of a man." In 2008, we launched the Charter by the Basque Men for Equality and Against Violence Against Women. This charter was presented by the Basque government president, and it's a document to be signed by men in order to promote their personal and collective commitment to gender equality. In more than a year, more than 10,000 men signed the charter. Between 2008 and 2011, we carried out the campaign, The Backpack for the Fathers. It was aimed at promoting equal parenthood. Those backpacks were distributed fundamentally by the Basque Public Health Service midwives to father-to-be men. And those backpacks included awareness-raising materials such as a guide on masculinities, a guide on equal parenthood, children's story entitled That's Secret, a documentary film called Fathers, and again to promote men's co-responsibility in care. In 2015 and 2017, on the occasion of Father's Day, we carried out campaigns to promote equality and co-responsibility in parental care. More recently, in 2018, we launched the campaign called Men and Equality, Moving from Words to Deeds. This campaign consists of an online application where men can self-evaluate their level of sexism and commit themselves to take specific actions in order to foster gender equality in their everyday life. Activities in spheres like co-responsibility, caregiving, the eradication of sexist violence, the dissemination of gender equality ideas, or even reporting of sexist messages and behaviors. The application provides information and resources to help men meet their commitments and monitor them. Over 200 men have registered and committed themselves to specific actions. In 2020, we launched the campaign called "In Coronavirus Time, More Care, Let's Do Our Part." During the lockdown, domestic and care work increased dramatically, and most men were confined to the home. So they have no excuse to do their share of care work. We took advantage of that situation to promote changes in men's behavior to make them more responsible for care. In addition to publicity campaigns, within the program we have organized many conferences. The first one was in 2007. We organized an international conference entitled Masculinity and Daily Life. And since then, we have organized a lot of conferences in which well-known experts in masculinity have participated, such as Miguel Lorente, Michael Kaufman, Gary Baker, and others. More remarkably, in 2018, we celebrated Gizondu's 10th anniversary ceremony. In that event, the Basque government president called on the Basque men to take more steps towards gender equality and against gender-based violence. As well as conferences and campaigns, we also have a specialized website and significant presence on social networks. We have published articles and documents which are available on our website. With regard to training, we promote men's participation in gender equality courses organized by other institutional organizations by disseminating the information through our networks. And since 2009, we have developed an annual awareness and training program. This program comprises a wide range of face-to-face and online courses related to men, equality, and masculinities. These courses are for free and aim at individuals, groups, and public and private organizations. So far, more than 8,500 men have participated in the training program. In 2016, we launched Youth and Equality 2.0 project. This project aims to prevent sexism and violence among young people, and it's based on an online video game on some education units. Those materials can be used individually or in group as a pedagogical tool at schools and in non-formal education contexts. Since 2016, about 1,800 students have participated in the project. In 2017, we initiated a new line of work for equality with male politicians. 2 men politicians groups were created, one of them at the local level in collaboration with EUDEL, which is the Association of Basque Municipalities, and the other at the Basque government level in collaboration with all its ministries. These men groups, these men politician groups, are spaces for training, reflection, and sharing, aimed at encouraging these men to promote equality in their sphere of influence, and in particular, to promote the personal and collective commitment of other men to the cause of gender equality. 22 male politicians have participated and 12 working sessions have been held. Different issues have been dealt with, such as the origin of the gender inequalities, feminism, gender-based violence, gender equality policies, and male power. We have also carried out other activities, like supporting men groups for equality, participating in awareness-raising activities organized by other organizations, and collaborating at international level with international agencies, organizations, and different countries. Now I'm going to tell you something about which I consider achievements. In quantitative terms, in a year, more than 10,300 men signed the Charter for Equality. In 3 years, more than 30,000 backpacks for equality were delivered to father-to-be men. More than 8,500 men have attended our courses on masculinity, with a very high level of satisfaction, 8.3 points out of 10. According to our evaluations, 80% of men who have participated in the courses have applied or will apply what they have learned in those courses. Women's NGOs and equality officers' level of satisfaction regarding the Emma Kunde's work to promote men's involvement in equality is evaluated with a high level of satisfaction, 7 points out of 10. We have more than 5,000 followers on Facebook, most of them men, 2,000 followers on Twitter. And thanks to the program, new Men's for Equality groups have been created in the Basque Country. In more qualitative terms, we have reached many and diverse organizations and men, like firefighters, policemen, students, teachers, NGO members, trade union members, company owners, workers, politicians, civil servants, users of social services, and so on. Apart from that, good quality materials on men and equality have been made available for the citizen. We have come up with innovative solutions to overcome difficulties. We have complied with the international norms and recommendations related to men and equality. We have consolidated a lane of action with men within the gender equality policies in the Basque Country. We also have achieved recognition. The program has been considered a best practice by different organizations. And most importantly, we have become a reference, a benchmark for many men in the Basque Country who want to support gender equality. Anyway, we have also a lot of challenges. We have to improve the evaluation of the program. We have to reach out to more men in an effective way. Work with strategic sectors like men leaders. We have to constantly review and turn criticism into opportunities. Find consensus on how to work with men for equality, and increase alliances with different sectors of feminism and other institutions and organizations. I would like to finish by saying that men are a substantial part of gender inequality problem and therefore a significant part of the solution. That is why the Basque Country government will continue encouraging men to renounce male privileges and get involved hand by hand with women in building a more just, equal and peaceful society. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Andar, for the very informative presentation and information. As I said previously, to those of you who have maybe just joined now, we won't be taking questions at the end of each presentation, as we are running behind of schedule due to some technical difficulties. So we will be moving straight into our next presenters and their stories. So next up, we have actually two people joining us or joining you on screen. It's Gerhard Hoffner and Fikri Anil Altintas from Germany, who will be talking about their personal experience and journey in the he for she movement in Germany. But before we start, a couple of words about both of them as well. So Gerhard Hoffner is a psychologist working in a project with men who perpetrated violence against their partners or ex-partners. He has done close cooperation with projects and institutions fighting domestic violence in Berlin. And as noted before, he is one of the 6 catalysts behind the He for She Germany movement as well. And Fikri Anil Altintas is a freelance author and project manager from Berlin. He writes on the construction and perception of critical masculinities and Orientalism. He is also one of the 6 catalysts behind the He for She UN Women movement in Germany. So, not to take up any more of your time, there you go, Gerhard and Fikri.
So I hope you can see let me just check with this. All right, I hope you can see our screen. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks for inviting us to this conference. My name is Anna Altintas. As you have introduced us, Gerhard Hoffner. We're live from Berlin today, and we will talk about the He for She movement, and in particular about the He for She movement from UN Women Germany. So we, as catalysts, speak for UN Women Germany today, not for the He for She in general. We will go as follows. We will give a short introduction on the He for She movement in general, and then elaborate on our UN Women Germany program with the He for She catalysts. And yes, we're happy to be joined by these experts today, and send you one screen from Berlin. What is He for She? For those who might not know, He for She is a solidarity movement within the feminist movement that fights for gender equality, has been fighting for centuries within the feminist movement, and it was initiated by UN Women in 2014. You might have heard of Emma Watson. She is somewhat behind or the face of this initiative. And ever since its installment, it has garnered more than 2 million commitments on a not only digital, but also offline commitments. And what we see as He for She is, it's an invitation, and this invitation can mean a lot of things for men and people of all genders to stand in solidarity with women, to create a bold, visible, and united force for gender equality. He for She might seem very binary, but we maybe just the tag, but we see our fight for all genders and for gender equality in general. As I have elaborated, He for She is a movement that was kickstarted by the Goodwill Ambassador Emma Watson, and it's the hashtag He for She. I mean, we all also define ourselves as he for she catalysts, has garnered more than 1 million tweets within 2 weeks and was one of the moments on Twitter in 2014. And what we do is it's just more than a social media movement. Within the different campaigns of he for she, it sparks community events and tries to initiate real life commitments and change. This is on a very political level, but also on a voluntary basis, as we as catalysts, as professionals, also engage within the tag of the he for she movement. That is obviously what he for she is today, and we can see some numbers. I won't dwell on that further. He for she has come up with very creative ideas to do social media campaigns. This year, especially in light of the Corona pandemic, it launched the he for she campaign called He for She at Home to encourage men to do the fair share and share on social media what they do. So to show, I mean, mostly also with celebrities, that they share mental work, the mental load, they share the care work at home, and also to place an equal importance on each other partner's careers. So with that very low-level engagement, we tried to build a momentum on raising awareness to this issue. And that was equally the case with the hashtag that was, or the campaign, the Year of Male Allyship on March 1st. On the day of Zero Discrimination, it launched the Year of Male Allyship. And what it did also, I mean, and similar to what the He for She at Home campaign was, to men to share their stance on gender equality on social media. We have a lot of celebrities participating and raising awareness and shedding light on this important issue, especially when in times of Corona pandemic, when the inequalities were heightened. But now my colleague Gerhard will go and talk particularly about our program, the He for She program, Catalyst program in Germany.
The Catalyst program was founded 2 years ago. We had 4 male advocates here in Germany, and since the March of this year, we had 2 new catalysts who are active in the campaign in Germany. And we have a wide variety of formats. We have a broad activists who make this catalyst program active. We work in public, and we work professional in special issues like sexism and perpetrator work, and especially critical masculinities. And we are active to be allies to the woman and to the feminists here in Germany. We participate in panels and give speeches. We make workshops. We have made a big symposium here in Berlin. So it's in this 2 years we had made a lot of activities. So there, besides Anja and me, we have 4 other activists. That's Vincent Emmanuel Herm, Dr. Joy Assungazo Alemazung, Robert Franken, and Martin Speer. They are in different areas and with different topics active. So, and I make a little spotlight on my work. I'm a psychologist, and I'm working in a project since 20 years with men who perpetrated violence against their partner, ex-partner. And important is that we are in this project very integrated with the support of the woman and with the support of the children. This works in the day-to-day practice. And this close cooperation with the projects and institutions here fighting against domestic violence here in Berlin, but also in Germany, that's very important to see what we are doing. What are the results of and the impacts of the work we are doing. Perhaps the other workshop in workshop number 3, there's the spotlight on this work against domestic violence, against male violence against women. Our group had made some conferences, a symposium, made some meetings, and are very active in press. We on with different perspectives. My focus is the psychological and social work against violence, but the main issue is to have this cooperation on different levels. We are also in the politics to change the society, the institutions, the associations in my area, to make another program to make the men responsible for their deeds.
Yeah, and a short spotlight on me. I mean, this being one aspect of the engagement of all 6 catalysts. So what we do as a group is to maybe collect all of our expertise, and then as this team of he for she catalysts, we try to give important and necessary impulse to the public debate, whether we do it professionally in a private context or as myself. I write articles on masculinities from a personal migrant background in Germany, since in Germany we try to adapt the local necessities into our work. And what I have maybe experienced and have witnessed is that there's a lot of negative narrative around Muslim and, in my case, Turkish masculinities, and I felt the need to write on that. And it given from my experience, given a lot of people important impulses to reflect on care work, to reflect on expectations on masculinity. And what I maybe focus on is the intersection of masculinities and Orientalism, racism in migration societies, as Germany is one, and what kind of societal developments benefit or the construction and the perception of marginalized masculinities. And as my colleague Gerhard has said already, we all engage in workshops. I do social media work and do offline and online workshops on the matter. So we as he for she catalysts, we always try to act as a team. We are mostly approached also by press when it comes to gender equality issues in Germany. So we want to be a very public team to speak on these matters. We're not afraid to do that. And in Germany, there is to some extent not very open environment to do that, and we would like to change that with our personal backgrounds, but our expertises to shift the societal paradigm on the matter. So yes, and that's me. And if you like to approach us, please make sure to visit UN Women Germany. They coordinate our work, but we have to say we do it all on a voluntary basis, so we're not getting paid for this. This is all voluntary, and and that's why it's such a nice idea to connect on an international level today. I mean, Gerhard has been already part of these conferences, so yes, thank you very much, and please make sure to check out the work of he for she. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerhard and Fikri. Next up, we will be moving on with a presentation by Troy Roderick. Troy has specialized in diversity and inclusion for around 25 years now. In his current ongoing engagements across business, business leaders on key insights and trends in gender equality, intercultural diversity, inclusive leadership, flexible work, LGBT plus inclusion, and all-scale system-wide change to create more inclusive organizations and customer and employee experiences. Until 2017, Troy worked as the leader of Telstra's global diversity and inclusion function, with reach into customer, community, and HR practices, which included his groundbreaking creation of All Roles Flex, and initiatives around inclusive leadership, gender equality, in Indigenous employment, and workplace responses to domestic and family violence. Troy's work has achieved record levels of women's representation in executive management, CEO leadership, team, and graduate cohorts. Consistent increases in women's recruitment, retention, and representation. His talk today is entitled Listening, Learning, Leading with Action. So without further ado, the screen is yours, Troy. Go ahead.
Thanks so much, Karel. And I think I'll say good afternoon, everyone. I think it's afternoon for most of you. Evening here in Australia, late evening. I'm joining you from Canberra, which is just coming out of winter in Australia. And it's the land of the Ngunnawal people. So I want to pay my respects to the Ngunnawal elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm delighted to have been invited to join you all to share the story of the Male Champions of Change movement, for which I am now working or involved as the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Insights. I'm going to share a little slide pack so that you can see what I'm doing. Make that big, everyone can see it, I hope. Is that looking good? Yeah, okay. And before I begin, I should say that because we're not doing questions owing to the time, please feel free to reach out directly either to the organisers or myself. My name is on this slide. You can get me on LinkedIn or via email at troy@malechampionsofchange.com, which is, all the words of the title joined together with .com at the end. So this presentation is really about a growing coalition of CEO leaders here in Australia who are applying their energy and accountability to changing norms around gender equality, both in their organisations and in broader society. The Male Champions of Change movement has been in place for around 10 years and started with a simple idea that men were really, the people who invented and largely run the system that is in organisations, in corporates and in government organisations. But when you looked around to see their presence in the work on gender equality, which by definition, of course, is part of running good businesses or running healthy organisations, they were largely missing from the conversation. So we have a statutory office here in Australia called the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, and the person who was occupying that role at the time, 2010, Elizabeth Roderick, who's now Special Rapporteur for the United Nations, decided that she would literally pick up the phone and call a whole bunch of senior men in business and start to engage them in the work of becoming more accountable for gender equality and change in their organisations. Now that, when you think about, the biggest phone company, the biggest bank, the army, the largest public sector organisations, the big airline, in a country like Australia, these are the organisations that are big brands, they're nation-building companies, they have huge customer bases and large employee bases. So the capacity to influence change was at the forefront of Liz's mind in bringing this group of people together. And the idea was essentially not that these men would, come in on their white horse and suddenly fix everything and make the world better and speak for women and take over, but that they would step up beside the work that women had been doing for decades to change the system on gender equality. And the first group, the founding group of MCC, began with literally maybe 8 or 10 members with this objective in mind, so that they were to step up beside women to make change, to really commit to understanding more about what's going on inside their own organisations and applying their heads and hearts to deeply getting close to the issue of gender equality. Now, although many leaders will say, this is part of their work and part of their commitment, very infrequently do they stop and spend the time to deeply understand what's going on inside their organisations and for their people. So the listening and learning piece was critical to the beginning of this and has remained critical to the ongoing success of the work. We talk about disruptive actions, and Karel mentioned All Roles Flex, which I was fortunate enough to lead inside one of the original MCC organisations when I was at Telstra. And this is the kind of work that for us turned the idea of flexible work sort of on its head and actually used flexibility as a starting point for work. And many of you will know, of course, that that almost any conversation that you're having about gender equality or diversity and inclusion will often lead back to ways of working or to the balance of paid and unpaid work in households or between members of couples. And in opposite sex couples, that becomes a gendered thing, which impacts people's ability to succeed in paid work or paid employment. So, to the extent that this actually changed ways of working around flexibility, it actually was quite a disruptive thing that happened. I'll share some more examples later. But now we have around 10 years of progress at MCC, and in many ways, the work that the champions have been able to do inside their organisations and the collective work they've been able to do together has established new norms for leading practice. I'll refer everyone watching to the great collection of resources and information that is open sourced and available on the malechampionsofchange.com website. When you look at reports and resources, everything is there over the past 10 years. And because we're all paying such a lot of attention, of course, to COVID right now, there are some new things that I should tell you about at this point that relate specifically to addressing gender equality opportunities and challenges in the COVID context, all based on the listening and learning that MCC leaders have done in their organisations and the practical actions that they've taken and the things they're kind of finding out as they go. Because obviously for all of us, this COVID thing is new and we're all kind of working it out and learning as we go along. So the resources relate to actions that leaders have taken, specifically leading on gender equality in their organisations around COVID, and care. Work and care is a big part of that. Another resource on accelerating flexible ways of working. So it's really an evolution of what we should be doing around All Roles Flex into during COVID and into recovery and rebuild. Supporting employees who are experiencing domestic and family violence during this time. And of course, I can't think of any part of the world where we haven't seen increases in this, particularly during times of isolation or lockdown or where people need to be at home. Interestingly, another resource on addressing employees who use domestic violence, so perpetrators of DV, that is a new piece that came out just about a month ago. And next week, it will interest you to know, a new piece of work which I'm sort of talking about in preview, which is about disruptive approaches to addressing and ending sexual harassment at work, a topic which many of us are familiar with, of course, over many years, but there are some new suggestions and disruptive approaches in this document that I think everyone will be interested in. So that's now. I'll just take a little step back into where we've been and where we're, the size of what I'm talking about. So from that 10-year ago beginning, MCC has now grown to a coalition of around 230 leaders. The name is suggests they're all men, but that's not actually the case. There are women involved in the coalition as well, 42 of them, in fact, as conveners or special advisors to the champions. And this is for a number of reasons. It's because sometimes MCCs are succeeded by women in their CEO role, so they have to be CEOs or board-level executives. And sometimes when CEOs move on, they're succeeded by women, which is a wonderful, fantastic thing. Or sometimes when we go into a sector like the fire and emergency sector, for example, some of the people leading those organisations are women anyway. So when you want to have a sector-based group, you are absorbing all of the leaders from that group. So it's still a mainly male population in MCC, but becoming more gender balanced in time. You can see on the slide that I'm sharing the employee base of those organisations, where they exist in the world, and the support that the champions get from implementation leaders. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can also see the groups that we now have. So, of course, the founding group is the first one I mentioned before. There are a number of other national groups, and by national I mean just based in Australia or in other countries. So Pakistan and Philippines also have MCC groups under our banner. And then there's a whole bunch of sector-specific groups, which each have, as you can imagine, their own sector-specific challenges and opportunities. So everything from sport to science and technology to the health sector. Our newest group is Australia-based. It is with Microsoft partners. So it is Microsoft Australia and all of the little companies inside their ecosystem, all with similar tech challenges, but actually focused on what they can do as a business together. In terms of what we do and how we do it, a quick little run through here of the guiding principles. So as I said before, stepping up beside women, actually achieving progress on women's representation, standing behind our numbers. All of the champions report publicly every year in what we believe is the largest or one of the largest voluntary disclosures on gender equality performance in the world. Go to the website, look for the impact report, and you can see all of the detail there. The latest report was released in December last year, which means our next one is soon. And importantly, another thing I should point out is that we're about moving the system. So sometimes work in this space is about fixing women, or it's about, requiring women to adapt or change. Women aren't really the problem here. It's the system that's not working. So male champions are about disrupting that piece so that we can create, if I may use the words that Catalyst uses to describe its work, workplaces that work for women, really, or systems that work better for women. On the basis of those guiding principles, this is where the listening and learning comes in. So really understanding what's going on inside organisations, tracking the impact of those actions and working collectively to advocate for change. One thing the champions have really noticed is that as they've become more fluent, more confident with the work, they can move beyond focusing inside their organisations to take collective action outside. And some of the domestic violence work in particular is one of those initiatives. The action pillars at the bottom of this section of the slide are how we situate our work. And they just give us a framework for packaging initiatives under each of those pillars. And importantly, as is necessary for all of work in this area, a focus on what outcomes you're looking for and how you're going to measure your impact. So I'm not going to read through these because everyone can see what's there, but it's the stuff that reflects the whole pipeline of employment. One of the biggest outcome measures, of course, which is pay equity, whether or not people are having flexible and inclusive experiences of work, and what kind of impact we can have on social issues, for example, domestic violence or women's economic empowerment. The measurable impact section of this slide, these are the things, if you go to the impact report and you look at what organisations are sharing, you'll see the disclosures around these various measures. And, you know, they're not always all great stories. That sometimes, you know, progress doesn't happen as quickly as you'd expect or in the right direction. But the champions are transparent about that. They're willing to learn from what they've been doing. And I think that transparency creates a real appetite to improve next time and to remain accountable for what they're focusing on. This next piece, which I'll share, is just some of the things that we've seen over the past 10 years. So I'll draw your attention mostly to the numbers on the right-hand side, which give you some degree of insight into the kind of performance that has been achieved across the group and what you can do when you get leaders focused on change and working together. So the outperformance of peers in terms of practical action. So in Australia, you might know that we also have a government-mandated reporting scheme where all employers with more than 100 people have to report to the government about their actions and impact on gender equality. And when I say employers, I mean private sector employers. So we have this huge database, or data set, I should say, that's now 6 years old, that gives us insight, it's all public, gives us insight to practical actions that organisations generally are taking. So when you compare MCC organisations with that other group, on most of the key measures, the MCC people are, or more of them are taking more action, which we see as something we're very proud of in terms of mobilising this group of men. You can all see the numbers where I've just noticed they're not in ascending order, which I would prefer they were, but jump around a number of stats there. We're talking about gender balance in recruitment, improving gender balance in key management personnel, which is that level just below CEO, mainstreaming flexible work, and the rate of women's promotions being greater than or equal to women's representation, which of course tells you that you're actually having some impact on moving, or establishing a strong pipeline of leaders. We are looking forward to seeing what this year's data will tell us, notwithstanding, of course, that it's been a tough year for everyone, and you know, we don't want to be too demanding and say you have to give us all your numbers, because, you know, even though your business, you might be an airline and you haven't been doing much flying lately, and you've just laid off 20,000 people. We're trying to get as much. We're relying on the goodwill of our members to provide whatever data they can to continue that accountability story. Finally, and I won't take up any more time, I'd like to just remind you that the MCC's work is particularly outcomes focused. So just draw your attention to all of the publications and all of the transparency that's provided around that. All of the material is open source. And here's a picture of Alan Joyce at the United Nations when we used to be able to go to things and talk. So Alan is the CEO of Qantas. He's one of the founding members. He was at the CSW, it was last year. And whenever we can, even though it's happening more online these days than it used to, the champions are out there sharing their vision, their enthusiasm for the work, and their impact, and inspiring other men and other leaders to do the same. At this point, I would normally say any questions, but I don't think we're doing that today. So I might just hand back to Karel and thank everyone for their time and attention.
Thank you very much, Troy. Unfortunately, yes, we are currently in the position where we will not be taking any questions at the moment, but it looks like we might have some time to take some at the end at about 6 p.m. local time here in Estonia. But in order to be able to do that, let's continue with the program that we have. Unfortunately, Sandy Ruxton will not be joining us today, so the next presenters will be the last but not least of our workshop. So please help me in welcoming Jake Sticka and Lana Wells. And a couple words about both of them before they go on as well. As a next-gen men's executive director, Jake is a passionate speaker and facilitator focused on gender-based issues related to the social and emotional development of young men, the health and well-being of men in communities, and gender equity in workplaces. Jake was named one of Avenue magazine's top 40 under 40, as well as having earned recognition from the British Council and the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. He has spoken at the United Nations as part of the Canadian delegation and participated in the UN Women Safe Cities Initiative Global Forum. He is also a proud advisor to the Calgary Immigrant Women's Association, Canadian Women Sport, as well as the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter. And Lana. Lana is the Brenda Stafford Chair in the Prevention of Domestic Violence and Associate Professor at the Faculty of Social Work, Fellow of the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary in Canada. Her areas of expertise include domestic, family, and sexual violence, women's issues, social policy, social justice, and social change. She's currently leading SHIFT, the project to end domestic violence. SHIFT's purpose is to develop, implement, and scale up best and promising primary prevention practices, strategies, and actions in partnership with governments, systems, community leaders, and NGOs with the goal of preventing violence and advancing equality. So, the screen is all yours. Lana and
Thank
Jake.
you. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. We're so pleased to be here today and excited to talk about some of the work happening in Canada, thanks to the conference organizers and our panel. I'm situated in Canmore, Alberta, which is about an hour from Calgary. I live in the Rockies, and Jake is situated in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. But as mentioned, we both work provincially and then across Canada, and we're excited to talk about our initiative today. But I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. As mentioned, I'm an associate professor in the Brenda Stafford Chair, and I'm in a unique position at the University of Calgary. And I created an initiative called SHIFT, the Project to End Domestic Violence, 10 years ago, which the purpose is to really advance primary prevention efforts. So that's really going upstream to prevent domestic and sexual violence, as well as advance gender equality. And specifically, we've been researching, designing, and testing, engaging and mobilizing men and boys over the last 10 years. And we're excited to talk about this particular project. But I wanted to give you some context of some of the work that I've done at the university. We've been engaged working with governments in terms of designing violence prevention strategies and policy frameworks, where we've been really focused on thinking about how to engage and mobilize men and boys and support priority funding, program evaluation, policy change as well. Today, we're going to specifically talk a little bit about a project. In 2018, the government of Canada put out their first gender equitable budget. And as a result, they committed $1.8 million at the time to partner and engage men to advance gender equality. And so before they're committed to building a national strategy as part of the gender-based violence prevention strategy. But they wanted to collect more information from men across Canada, specifically pro-feminist men who are currently engaged in gender equality work in Canada, and to learn from them on how we can attract and invite and encourage and support other men and boys to get involved and mobilize. So we're going to talk a little bit about a research project I conducted with my colleague, Dr. Sarah Fotheringham, called Tomorrow's Men Today, and it's the one circled in 2019. It's called Tomorrow's Men Today, Canadian Men's Insight on Engaging Men and Boys in Creating a More Gender Equal Future. As it was this research with pro-feminist male-identified allies that allowed us to then move into a second phase, which is building and developing a national network. And I'm going to quickly turn it over to Jake, who's going to introduce himself and his role in this project.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is just before 8 in the morning where I am, and I've had my second cup of coffee, so hopefully I make sense by now. I am proud to represent our organization as executive director and one of the co-founders with my colleagues, Jason and Jamal in the photo there. We came together in 2014 to really work towards redefining and undefining what it means to be a man in those settings of youth, community, and workplaces, really working towards a future where boys and men feel less pain and therefore cause less harm. We have a hybrid kind of nonprofit social enterprise approach where we do receive some funding for some of our programs, but a majority of our kind of corporate workplace setting work is fee for service, helping us cover some of those costs. And we're really excited to be in this project with Lana and benefiting from all the great research work in the foundation that she's laid out, always learning from her, but really taking on a bit of a leadership role in Canada because we work across 3 provinces to help support and align some of our peers doing this work as well too. So that's enough about me, I think, for the context.
Great. So as I mentioned, in 2018, Canada committed $1.8 million to partner with men and boys to advance gender equality. And then they put out a process to apply for research to help inform that work. And so they wanted to hear from men who are resisting and challenging harmful gender norms and who are promoting and advocating for gender equality and gender justice. So in response, we designed a qualitative study that would, 1, reveal the motivations and experiences of pro-feminist men currently engaged in gender equality work in Canada. And then 2, to learn how we can attract, invite, encourage, and support more Canadian men and boys to engage and mobilize in this area. And so we ended up interviewing 33 diverse men from coast to coast to coast who shared their experiences and expertise with us. But we wanted to point out a few things. First, we were looking specifically for pro-feminist men, and that is men who are actively supporting feminism and its efforts to bring about the political, economic, cultural, personal, and social equality of women and all genders. But we also had to create a gender equality index, and this might be of interest to some of the people who are at this conference today. We created a gender equality index that had 8 indicators and 42 practices that were really a way to describe the conduct and actions and commitments of pro-feminist men who are doing gender equality work. And this helped us in the recruitment because we moved and asked feminists and feminist networks across Canada to nominate male-identified allies. And through that process, we needed to see that they were actually doing work in very public and observable ways. So if you're interested in the details of the research report, I encourage you to go to our website. It's both, we have an English version and French, but I can't go, because of time and we can't go into all the details, but we took the information and based on what was happening in Canada and some of the commitments, we pulled together a series of recommendations which helped inform the partnership between Jake and I and Next Gen Men in the University. And so some of the recommendations that came out of the study, plus the work that's happening in Canada, the men said that we needed more funding and it should go directly to pro-feminist men and pro-feminist organizations that are already leading this work in Canada. And there are some exceptional leaders and organizations already engaging in this work, but there hasn't been tons of funding, as we know, for a variety of reasons. So there was a recommendation to actually put money where there's already the leadership and support. Second, we needed to bring pro-feminist men together with feminist leaders to foster and build this field together as opposed to in isolation and siloed. So this would involve working through issues of accountability, healing, and reparation. And obviously this will take time, investment, and patience, but we've already started to begin that process. We also learned that we needed to get more men and boys through the door, learning and transforming. And obviously this can be done through supporting positions and programs in feminist and pro-feminist organizations that actually build opportunities to engage men. We also recommended the need to actually fund more grassroots organization. There are a lot of ethnocultural and Indigenous communities and have leaders engage in this work, but often there's quite a few barriers for them to access funding or support. The fourth recommendation was to often the men in the research talked about key thinkers, teachings, and practices that has actually influenced them to get involved in gender equality work. And we know, and I think you had Dr. Michael Flood here with you today, but creating virtual interventions and supports online was a key recommendation as well. And then, of course, leveraging settings and developmental transitions that can be targeted for mobilization, fatherhood, motherhood, adolescence, and so forth. And also engaging people where they work, live, learn, and play is obviously critical to transforming the environments that influence and shape us. And so after we submitted the report, the federal government came to myself and Jake and asked if we'd come together to actually action out the first two recommendations. And so we put a proposal together to the government of Canada to support, connect, and build the capacities of pro-feminist men to end gender-based violence and advance gender equality. And the how was we would start to build a network and create more spaces and opportunities for pro-feminist male leaders to engage in this work. And then our plan is to submit a blueprint to the Women in Gender Equality, which is a ministry in Canada, on a way forward. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jake to dig into the consultations and work that happened to advance this recommendation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lana. I think Troy said it well in his presentation. Back when we used to be able to go to places, early this year, I traveled across Canada. Obviously, we know it's not a small country, so I was collecting lots of air miles, so it's very foreign to me to be sitting in this corner of my living room. But I was really privileged to take the research outcomes as well as kind of the foundation and groundwork for this work into community and to meet with people doing this work rather than kind of, just talking heads around panels and those kinds of things and really hearing from them about some of these outcomes in the direction that we were going towards. So I'll be sharing some of the themes and threads that came out of those consultations. So some of the major themes that really resonated across Canada, first of all, was that this work and the people leading and funded to do this work are not representative of the mosaic of diversity that we have here in Canada. As Lana said, there are individuals leading this work in Indigenous communities and ethnocultural communities, but the majority of funding and accolades do fall to predominantly white and cisgendered men. Another really, I think, interesting and crucial piece as we look towards engaging and mobilizing more men and boys was a constant tension about the language of using feminist or pro-feminist to describe men who are doing anti-patriarchal work. There are potentially men who are doing this work who do not see themselves in that language, and maybe it's a disincentive for participation. So that was a constant tension across the country. And then as well, the fact that this initiative to engage men and boys cannot sit apart from the greater context of the gender equity movement. The complex question of accountability and what it looks like should be at the forefront, and obviously building on the great work that women in the LGBTQ community have been doing around gender-focused work. Next slide, Lana, please. Thank you. And then a couple important themes that came up that weren't necessarily coast to coast, but important nonetheless. There are national strategies being developed on gender equity and gender-based violence in Canada from a federal government level, but unfortunately they appear to be developed in distinct and siloed fashion rather than overlapping. And we know that gender equity work is heavy on primary prevention, so we would like to see more of that being done together. Additionally, we have to contend with the impacts of colonialism and understand that Canada's First Nations do not hold the same ideas of gender as Western settlers do, and that the impact of patriarchy being foisted upon those communities have resulted in deep wounds, and that many are returning to their traditional practices as part of their healing. And as well, anything that kind of comes from a federal government level, there's a level of distrust across that as well. So a barrier for further engagement. And then finally, obviously, Canada is a bilingual country. Quebec is a predominantly Francophone province. And having these resources and networks and opportunities to connect and grow and having to be culturally relevant and accessible across Canada is very important. Oftentimes, Francophone speakers feel left out of Anglophone spaces. And there's a lot of really interesting work happening there where they already have kind of a provincial network. So lots of learnings to be had from predominantly Anglophone provinces as well, too. So those were some of the major themes. And then I just wanted to share with you some of the feedback that we heard directly from the participants as we were going across Canada. And starting off with some of the positives, some of the hopes. There was a desire for increased collaboration and learning in and around engaging men and boys, not feeling alone or isolated in this work. A feeling of legitimacy. Oftentimes, these individuals are kind of solo practitioners, and belonging to a national network offers them that legitimacy. Again, the national movement and learning from people doing this work and feeling a part of a bigger conversation is important. And then finally, getting more men involved. Lana sent out kind of the feelers to feminists and feminist organizations across Canada. And in a country of about 38 million, we ended up with 150 some names or something like that put forward. So the reality is that there's maybe not as many men who are doing this type of work in public and observable ways. So we really want to show that this is a space for men to be doing this work. And then finally, as well, presented with this idea of a national network, there's a lot of positive and things to look forward to, but there's fears and apprehensions as well, such as territorial behavior in and around kind of expertise, geography, resources, those kinds of things. And who's not at the table? We talked about how this work as it stands is not necessarily reflective of the mosaic of diversity in Canada. So who's missing, whose voices isn't there? And then inevitably that also recreates potentially some old power structures. Concentrating resources within kind of a network and not within individual practitioners and community, or taking resources away from women's empowerment work. The continuity of funding support. We know that as governments change, sometimes these supports and resources can be precarious. And then as well, a duplication of efforts of things that are already happening, potentially on a provincial scale or a regional scale. So some real concerns there as well that needed to be held in mind as we moved forward with this. And then finally, as many of you are contending with as well, COVID has really hampered some of the momentum that we had through this project. So we're really considering how whatever we put forward adapts to the realities that we're facing today. From the research and then taking it into community, we know that this work shouldn't be done from a top-down approach, and that we really need a representative founding group of stakeholders across geography, intersectionality, and different diverse identities to undertake the development of the network's initial mandate. And we would love to kind of support that, but really kind of a bottom-up grassroots approach. And then why, academics and folks in Lana's position are such key strategic partners is the dissemination and support of research, as well as sharing of wise practices among early participants to really kind of tick that box of building their capacity and knowing that they can go forward and do this work and enlist others to do so as well. I know normally we would ask for questions, but Lana and I, if any of this work interests you, would love to hear from you. So as you see here on the screen, you can reach Lana at lmwells@ucalgary.ca. I really do encourage you to check out her website, preventdomesticviolence.ca. That's 10 years body of work, great research papers that I've learned a lot from up there. And then you can reach myself at jake@nextgenmen.ca and check us out at nextgenmen.ca as well. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake and Lana, and thank you to all of the wonderful speakers who have shared their expertise, knowledge, and experience in the field and the work that they do all across the globe, we can really say. I understand that we are out of time for today. It is 2 minutes past 6 p.m. here in Estonia. But I just cannot finish this workshop or session up without coming back to a question that we have received from the audience. So if it is okay with all of you, I would still like to get that across. It is a question that is addressed to all of the participants in the workshop. So if you feel like you have an answer ready and you'd like to shoot, then please do raise your hand, and we'll unmute you one by one so that we just don't get a mixed match of answers and conversations. But to the question itself now. What is at least one policy measure that a government could undertake and put in their gender equality strategy to include men in promoting gender equality? It's a quite long one, so I'll repeat it just in case. What is at least one policy measure that a government could undertake and put in their gender equality strategy to include men in promoting gender equality? So whoever feels like they have an answer ready and would like to share it with all of us, then please do raise your hand. Yes, go ahead, Gerhard and Fikri.
Yeah, I would like to raise one question. Maybe your experts can elaborate on that. But what I find intriguing and based also on research is it could be somewhat binding for men to not only be in parental leave for in 2 months. That's at least the case in Germany, and it's been obvious that the longer men are engaged with children and in the household, it can lead to more important and binding impulses for engaging in gender equality. So I would just give this impulse to my expert colleagues to elaborate on that. But I think that could be somewhat binding to make them take parental leave at least 6 months or even longer in my view.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to weigh in? I think, yes, go ahead, Troy. And Lana, you had your hand up earlier as well, but go ahead, Troy.
Oh, I'll unmute myself. So, yeah, I mean, this is a follow-on, really, around parental leave. What I'm seeing here at home is progressive employers doing two things. One is removing the ridiculous distinction between primary and secondary carer leave, because what is a secondary carer anyway? And really making parental leave policies designing them such that when a child arrives in a situation, when a child arrives, that parents, whoever they might be, whatever gender they might identify with, have the ability to spend time caring for that child when it's there. And if you remove all of those distinctions and all the gender labels and all of that, we tend to find that in opposite sex households, more men are stepping forward to take more time, to spend time raising their children. That hasn't necessarily found its way into government schemes. So you still have, paid parental leave schemes, and then you have this weird thing called dad and partner pay, which is sort of a smaller amount of time and less money, which doesn't help anybody. So to follow on from what Gerhard and Anna was saying, to equalise all of these things and really take the distinctions out of the story, because you're just reinforcing gender norms if you leave them the way they are.
Thank you, Troy and
That's
Lana.
I was going to say mandatory parent leave policies, and we see in places like in Canada, Quebec, when it went mandatory, immediately a high percentage of parents, fathers took it. And so I think it has to be mandatory, as was mentioned, and the flexibility in the workplace as well in terms of labor codes. And I think that's a place. So if I think about a gender equality plan, I think about different ministries that have different responsibilities. So I also think about the Ministry of Education, and we know a great place, prevention site is schools, and how curriculum is delivered and what's in that curriculum, and ensuring that gender equality and equity and power and privilege and norms, gender norms and stereotypes are actually covered and within those curriculum, and then that leads to professional training in faculty of educations. I think that's critical that is another piece. And then I think about public health, and specifically now, I think another place is thinking about virtual interventions and supports. Often when you think about men reaching out, there isn't a huge investment or supports online. It's mostly around men's rights. So when people click in or men go for help or support, they're often led down a path. And so really starting to build that cyber and technology and supports for men that promote healthy relationships and so forth, I think would be a critical area to invest in as well.
Thank you very much, Lana. Would anyone else like to add something? Doesn't seem like it. Well, I think the vote is out then, and I think the general conclusion and answer is that if there's one place to start, then it should be mandatory parental leave, and I believe it was Fikri who mentioned 6 months, so there is at least one point, and I hope that that satisfied the audience member who asked that question. As I said previously, unfortunately, our time is up for today. Fortunately for all of you listening, the conference itself is not over. It will continue tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. local time. You all should have received the link and just continue on logging on to that. I would like to thank you all for your time, the speakers, the participants. It has been a very fruitful and thought-provoking last almost 2 hours or so. My apologies again for some of the small technical glitches that we had in the beginning, but I hope that you were still able to take the most out for yourself from the workshop as such. So